At some point in each FBI special agent's career, they are assigned to a top 10 field office. That's, of course, one of the big cities. And there are, seems like I always get about 12 words in before I hit my roadblock. Let's try that again. At some point in every FBI special agent's career, they are assigned to a top 10 field office. That is in one of the major U.S. cities. And in Harry Trombitas' case, that was New York City. I'm Clark Donnelly with Jessica Hemmelgar and retired FBI Special Agent Harry Trombitas. Welcome back to Off the Record, an FBI agent's perspective. And Harry, it wasn't all tailing mobsters and breaking up drug rings while you were in New York. In a city like New York, every time you turn around, it seems like somebody famous is coming around the corner. No exception for you. You met quite a lot of celebrities while you were in the Big Apple.
Yeah, it was like you said, Clark, it was kind of every day you saw somebody that you recognized, either, a musician of some kind like Bono, or you might see celebrity entertainers, other individuals, Neil Diamond, just I could go on and name a number of them, but you get the idea, I think, and certainly news people, like Dan Rather and Tom Brokaw and Diane Sawyer, Peter Jennings, all of those. So you might go home in the evening and be watching the news, and I'd tell Barb, I'd say, "Oh, I forgot to tell you, I saw Tom Brokaw today," or I saw Diane Sawyer.
No big deal.
No,
Yeah.
it wasn't. They're just regular people,
Sure.
but they have a highly public profile, and so it is kind of a big deal that you see these people and that they're really live individuals. And I remember one time we were something was going on in the Middle East, and I think we were following either Iraqi or Iranian representatives around at the time. And that was an interesting thing. We would follow some of these folks. They'd be protesting in the United States. They'd be in downtown Manhattan. You'd see them with picket signs and protest signs and things all gathered in a group, basically chanting death to the United States and all these kinds of things. And then you'd follow them back to their residence, and they'd stop off at a strip club or do other things that, they were actually enjoying the life of the United States. So it was kind of a interesting phenomenon. I always
The
thought,
mullahs might not approve.
yeah, it just, America's so bad, but you're out enjoying you got a beautiful home out in the suburbs, you're hitting the strip clubs, you're doing different things that, again, it wasn't all of them. It was just, a few of the individuals that weren't quite in the regular mold that you would expect. And I remember we were following one of the Iranians around, and they had an embassy not too far from where we were at. And again, there was some kind of disturbance in the Middle East and that. So our team was put on a couple of the representatives, and they were at the embassy for that particular day in downtown Manhattan. And it was a beautiful day. I was sitting out. I actually got out of my car, and I was around the block from the embassy, Iranian embassy. And again, it could have been the Iraqi embassy. I just can't remember. But anyway, I'm sitting there leaning against my car, just kind of watching people go by. And all of a sudden I hear this, this cat call or cat whistle or whatever we used to call it when, you know, I turned to my left from the direction of the whistle, and first thing I see is this beautiful girl walking on the street or on the sidewalk, heading towards me along the sidewalk. I'm parked on the side of the street, and I mean, she was, breathtaking, just gorgeous, and she continued on. I obviously didn't say anything to her or whatever, but I'm trying to figure out who in the heck would whistle at her that loud. And that was kind of embarrassing a little bit. And who do I see but Reggie Jackson from the New York Yankees? And he's coming up behind her and coming up towards me, and he looks over at me because he knew I was standing there. I saw her. He goes, "Wasn't she beautiful?" And I said, "Yeah." I had to agree with you. And he goes into a deli right outside near where my car is parked, and I'm just sitting there, and I could see inside the deli. He and the guy from the worker in the deli are pointing out towards me. And I'm going, uh-oh, I wonder what's going on here. Next thing I know, Reggie comes out of the deli and he goes, "Hey," he said, "are you with the FBI?" And I'm like, no, I'm dressed in shorts and a t-shirt, trying to blend in with people in the city and that. And I mean, but it was so obvious. I said, "Well, I don't know. What do you need?" And he goes, "Hey, do you want my autograph?" And I said, "Sure." And he goes, "Hey, why don't you call your other agents around and I'll sign everybody, give everybody an autograph and that." And so at this point, it was like, what's the use of being coy? So I let everybody went, hey guys, I got Reggie Jackson here. He wants to sign autographs and that for our team. And I said, how did you know I was with the FBI? And he goes, "Oh, you guys are watching the embassy. We know that they're right around the corner." So apparently no secret that the Sads were watching the embassy and that. And so I mean there was stuff going on in the Middle East, so I think everybody suspected that would happen. So I get a little index card out, and Reggie signs it to me. He personalized it to Harry Trombitas, number 44, Reggie Jackson. And I still have that card today uh, down in my basement where I have some memorabilia and that Buckeye stuff and Brown stuff and a couple celebrities like Reggie Jackson. And he actually signed autographs for the other agents as well. And so that was cool. He was really a nice guy. And I think he even said something like, "Hey, I appreciate what you guys do." And then he walked away, continued on down the street and that. So anyway, that was one of the interesting things that interactions I had with a celebrity. And I remember one time I wanted to take the kids to Yankee Stadium to see a ball game. And I knew that Mickey Mantle, gosh, I just like that out. Mantle had a restaurant in Manhattan. And I thought it would be fun to go to the ball game and then we would come back and eat at Mickey Mantle's restaurant afterwards. And so we load up the car, drive from the Poconos in to go to Yankee Stadium. We're sitting behind the Yankees dugout, pretty close up, probably in the third or fourth row behind the dugout, and some pretty good seats. And so anyway, we watched the game. I think they were playing the Indians that day, or I'm sorry, now the Guardians, but to me, they'll always be the Indians. But so now we're going to go back and we're going to eat at Mickey Mantle's restaurant. So we drive back into Manhattan, and I remember parking, letting the kids out and Barb out. And we go in the restaurant, and wouldn't you know, the waitress comes up to us, or whoever the person was, and says, "We're sorry, our grill is broken. We
Oh
can't
no.
serve, we can't serve any food except for like salad and maybe some pastries or something like that." And I said, "Oh man," I said, "we came all the way from the Poconos. We wanted to eat in Mickey's restaurant and that." And now, of course, the day that we come, the grill is broken. And so she kind of laughs, but she goes off on her own and she goes to a back room and she comes back out. She says, "Hey, Mickey wants to meet with you guys." I'm like,
Whoa!
I'm like, "What?" And yeah, he's there eating with dinner with his wife. Apparently they have food. Maybe it was just the salad. I don't know. But but anyway, so she leads us back to this back room, and there's Mickey and I guess his wife. They're sitting there, having a little bite to eat, and walk up to him, and Mickey kind of introduces himself to us, and he takes pays a particular attention to the kids, asks what my son's name was and what my daughter's name was, and he takes out two Mickey Mantle cards and writes a personal note to each one of them. And he didn't want to give Barb and I one because he thought we'd probably sell it or something. So anyway, that was the Mickey Mantle story. So we left there having met one of the greatest baseball players of all time, and he was really a nice, decent person. So it was kind of a great time. And of course, when we had Thanksgiving, you had the Macy's parade. You've got just all the Christmas stuff that goes on in New York City. So just gorgeous, great place to visit. All the plays and the concerts. New York really does have it all, and I just remember every time that we had visitors at our house, had somebody come along and come out to visit us. We had to take them into New York and take them around Manhattan and maybe do a ball game or something like that. So it was fun for them. But for me, I worked there 5 days a week, sometimes six, 7 days a week. New York is the last place I wanted to go. But again, we did our best to make sure that we kept them entertained. So it was all good stuff.
So while you're in New York, you're part of a surveillance operation, and I think you mentioned, you guys did a lot of it. You got real good at it. So the Bureau came along and formed a special unit that you were able to be a part of. And that led to some more interesting experiences as well, and not just in New York, right?
The FBI has, as I mentioned before, 56 field divisions, and surveillance is something that not every field division has the luxury of having. So they either don't have enough personnel or they don't have the capabilities that are required for a surveillance team. They would tap into nearby offices that had a surveillance team that they could borrow for a case or something like that. And the Bureau saw that this was happening quite a bit. So they created what was called the Special Operations Response Team, or SORT for short. And it was made up of surveillance agents from around the country who would be able to be in a position where they could travel to some of these field divisions and that needed support because they didn't have their own surveillance team. And that way, it was taking agents from different offices. It wasn't relying on another field division where you can't afford to have 6 or 7 surveillance agents leave the division. That would take a huge amount of your manpower away. So having this sort team where you could pick from a number of different field divisions, it kept it from being a hardship on a particular division. And I did go on some interesting trips. One of the ones that I'll never forget, actually went twice, and was to Hawaii. And
Ooh.
yeah, it was, there are certain trips in the Bureau that we call boondoggles. And there are others that were like going to Moline and or some other place that not necessarily as attractive as Hawaii would be. So if you ever got assigned to go on a trip and you went someplace nice, we called it a boondoggle. It was just like, look at you, you've really fallen into the good luck here. So, but so what was going on at the time? There was the president of the Philippines was a gentleman by the name of Ferdinand Marcos, and he had lost power after an election, and but there were still a lot of Marcos sympathizers who were upset that he lost the election and that, and Aquino became the new president, and she was not in favor of everybody certainly that backed Marcos. So there was a lot of friction, a lot of indications that there might be some kind of a revolution to try to get Ferdinand Marcos back in power and overthrow Aquino. So the United States, and working closely with the Philippines, decided that they would take accept Marcos to our country, over to the United States, with the understanding that he was not to leave and go back to the Philippines, that he would stay out of there and not cause a revolution and that. And so they met with Marcos and his family and the representatives from the Philippines, and they agreed that a good spot for him would be in Honolulu, in Hawaii. And they actually, I don't know exactly how it came about, but there was a compound. It was a building with several other, I guess, housing type units inside of a gated area. And it was like, a compound. And they Marcos agreed to go live in this particular compound. It was in Makiki Heights in Honolulu, with the understanding that he would stay there. He would stay on the island. He wouldn't try to leave and go back to the Philippines. If he did, he would face some serious prison time from some of the things he did back in the Philippines. So there was an incentive for him to stay away from the Philippines and stay on Honolulu, on the grounds in Honolulu. But as you can imagine, there were a lot of people who were so concerned that he might try to flee Honolulu and go back to the Philippines, that they decided that we need a way to ensure that we keep him on the island. And so they decided that they would utilize the Special Operations Response Team, and they would send agents over to Honolulu to keep an eye on Marcos, to make sure that he didn't go back to the Philippines and that. So I remember being on the first team that was called on our special operations group. The head of it was James Kallstrom, who became pretty infamous in the FBI. Great guy, assistant director. Many people wanted him actually to become a director, but he didn't. But he was a great. He was a chief of special operations at the time, and he called me into his office, and along with a couple of other agents, and said, "Hey, here's what's going on. We're going to send you guys over there, kind of set up the surveillance, how it should be handled, and any kind of resources and things that you need, let us know, and we'll try to provide those to you." And again, the goal is to keep Ferdinand Marcos from leaving the country. So I was all excited about heading out to Hawaii, and Port Barb, was with we had two young children at the time, and I wanted her to come out and spend a little time in Hawaii, and we figured out the cost, what it would cost for her and the kids to fly. And, that our daughter was just too young at the time really to fly. And unfortunately, she wasn't able to make it out, but flew out to Hawaii, and we set up our special operations team. out there in Hawaii. We met with the different personnel from the Hawaii office, the Honolulu office, and came up with a game plan on how we're going to handle following Marcos and making sure that he did not leave the island. We knew that we had to have agents on duty 24/7 so that they were there. You never knew when Marcos may try to flee the island and that. So we had to have constant surveillance on the compound in Makiki Heights and make sure that he did not try to flee. We were in the process of setting that up, and we wanted to get a camera since Makiki Heights is located on the top of I guess, a small mountain or a big hill, depending on how you want to look at it. And it had, again, a gate, a cement gate or wall around it. And it had its own security team that manned the gate so that they could keep track of who was coming in and out of the compound. And it was impossible to set a car anywhere along that road leading to the compound because it would stick out like a sore thumb. And we were supposed to be undercover, if you will, and covert. So it was very challenging on how we were going to be able to set up to make sure that we didn't see or that he didn't come out and try to take off. So we came up with a couple of plans. We decided that we'd set a unit down at the end of the road on one side and another unit down at the other side and try to blend in with the neighborhood there. And then we had installed a camera at nighttime that focused in on the gate, and we were able to beam that signal back to an apartment complex in Honolulu, where we had agents that watched that camera and look for anybody coming and going. And so if a car would come out of the gate, the agents that were watching the camera from an apartment complex not too far away would call out the direction of travel and what kind of car it was. And then the agents on both sides of depending on what side the car was heading to, would watch for that car to come down the mountain and would then pick up on it. And the team would then start surveillance and follow to see where they were going in that. So, it was not the best situation, but it was the best that we could come up with at the time. And I just remember driving around Honolulu. I had just come, I was actually still in New York when I was sent on this trip. And if the light changes in New York and you're not moving, people are honking at you. And, the old saying is, you got one hand on the steering wheel and one hand in the rear, flipping people off while you're driving in New York. So to say that people are a little impatient, that's where I had been for a number of years already. And I remember one time just following along, a couple of cars were in front of me, not bureau people, but just regular citizens. And we were stopped at a stoplight, and then the light changed and nobody's moving. And of course, me being most recently from New York was like, hey, what's going on? Ready to honk my horn. Everybody's just sitting there all peaceful, and that it goes through a whole light cycle. And
No
nobody
way.
honked, nobody did anything. And finally, the light changed again, and the guy putters off, and and it occurred to me, hey, Dorothy, you're not in Kansas anymore. I mean, people were so laid back in Honolulu. Nothing bothered them, hang loose. Yeah, it was startling to me because everybody was so calm and peaceful and wasn't all stressed out that they weren't moving as soon as the light turned. So anyway, worked on on that case for 35 days the first time, got sent back home, and then about a year later, I got sent out back out to Honolulu again. I was supposed to be there for 60 days this time, and they changed hotels for us. The first time that we were there, we were kind of off the water, off the ocean, in a place where apparently a lot of pilots and flight attendants and that stayed. And the next time that we went, we were staying at one of the nicest hotels that they had, and it was absolutely gorgeous to be there. We were right on the ocean. It was just beautiful, and it so happened to be the Los Angeles Lakers training camp, and the Lakers were staying at the same hotel. It was the Hawaiian Hilton Village, and they were staying at the same hotel as us. And so you'd get up in the morning or come back in the evening or whatever, and you'd see people like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Magic Johnson, Byron Scott, Mitch Kupchak, Jerry West. This is back when he had retired by that point. But just all the legends were right there. You'd have a beer with a couple of the guys in the evenings and that, and it was kind of a really a neat thing. And Honolulu itself was just a dream. The weather was incredible. It was always warm, but usually a nice breeze, and everybody was so healthy. I mean, doing the Tai Chi and all the yoga. And, we'd get our runs in, along the ocean every day. But we actually did work while we were there. And I
Oh
used to piss,
no.
I used to piss my uncles off. They found out that I went to Honolulu, and I made it a point to tell them that, they were upset because we were probably living like fat cats, and that the taxpayer was paying our bill. And I would tell my Uncle Vic and a couple of the others that, you know what, you're absolutely right. And, I just want you to know, though, we specifically asked that your tax money go to fund this project. Oh, you son of a bitch. But anyway, no, I mean, we actually did work. It was 24/7 coverage on the trips. And, there was a lot of pressure to make sure that Ferdinand did not leave the island. Of course, we had somebody on the inside of the Marcos family providing us some information, and we had would get periodic recordings of some of the conversations. And one of my favorites was Imelda, who had what, 100 shoes or 1,000 pair of shoes or whatever
Yeah,
it was.
A
I'm not
lot
sure
of beautiful shoes.
Yeah,
yeah, she was known for the shoes.
yeah, but she would sing, and she would, sing for the family, and we'd have these recordings of, this woman, and, no disrespect to her, that her voice was, let's just say, not the best. And she would entertain her family by singing in that, and I don't know, maybe it was good, and it just wasn't my kind of singing. I don't know, but anyway, it was kind of fun to hear that stuff. And overall, it was a fantastic trip. The pilots that we had up helping to keep an eye on things during moving surveillance, and that they were required to get so many air hours in. So if we probably had, I don't know, 4 or 5 different pilots there, and while they were there, if they weren't getting up on surveillance because it was too cloudy, or there was a weather problem or whatever, they weren't getting the hours in that they needed to maintain their FBI flying credentials. So occasionally they would have to make side trips to try to get their hours in, and that would sometimes entail I know one time I went with one of our pilots, and we flew to Maui and landed in Maui, and we went to a restaurant there to have dinner. And, I mean, it was just little side trips in that they were going to have to use be up in the air anyway. Why not go to someplace nice and visit? So we flew over some of the islands and that. And I remember one time, one of the pilots and he had always wanted to try to fly in a glider, and apparently he arranged to have at the airport have someone haul the glider up, and it would be him as the pilot and me as the passenger, haul us up along the over the ocean and alongside one of the mountains there, and would release us, and we'd float around, and he'd be able to see what it was like to commandeer a glider. And so I just remember getting towed up to a certain height and released. And he would, you got the air currents from the mountain and from the ocean. So you're just riding. We could have rode those all day. I mean, he's getting it. He swings over towards or to the mountains. We're probably, I don't know, it seemed like about 20 feet away from the mountain. And then he would swing back over the ocean, and it just incredible. And then at some point we ended up landing back on at the airport and that. And it was one thing that I'm glad that I had the opportunity to do. It was just incredible. And so we did have some fun things to do while we were there. But again, we did work. I don't want people to think it was all fun and games. Sometimes, like I said before, hours of boredom and minutes of sheer terror trying to follow somebody and not lose them and try to be covert about it. So it was a challenge, but it was a beautiful place to be. I was supposed to be there for 60 days, and on day about 40, I get a call from the United States Attorney's Office in New York, and they want me to come back to testify in a trial. And I told the assistant U.S. attorney in charge of the case, I said, look, I'm out in Hawaii. I'm going to be here another 20 days or so. I'll be back then. He goes, no, I need you to come back now. I think I'm going to have to put you on the stand the following Monday. And I begged him. I said, hey, are you sure you need me? You sure you need me? And he said, yeah, absolutely. And so yeah, I had no other choice. I had to check out of my room, go to the airport, catch a flight back to New York. Barb picked me up at the airport and took me back to our home in the Poconos. And the next morning, I drove to the U.S. Attorney's Office in Manhattan and went upstairs to meet the AUSA. It was on a Sunday, I remember that. And Monday, I was going to testify. I go into the office, and I'm sitting there in the lobby, and he comes out and he goes, oh, he said, I forgot to call you. We don't need you now. And I said, you gotta be freaking kidding me. You pulled me in from Hawaii, and I asked you, do you really need me? And he said, absolutely. He goes, I know, I apologize. I forgot to call you and tell you, you didn't have to come. Yeah, I mean, I would have punched the guy, but there you go. That's kind of stuff happens, you got to grin and bear it. And so I ended up not testifying that particular time, but certainly had testified multiple times before. I remember one time there was a major drug case going on with a Mexican cartel, and we were asked to fly down to El Paso and follow around some of these drug cartel guys. And we realized that they had a drug route that they usually followed on up to New Mexico, someplace up in New Mexico. And our job was to try to identify what houses that they went to drop off their drugs and things. And so our team, SORT team, got sent to El Paso to work this case, and which we did every single day and night. But one day we had off, they had a down day, so myself and the other team members, we walked across into Mexico and went to a Mexican restaurant, had authentic Mexican food, which was, I'm not a big Mexican food fan, but I'll tell you what, the food that I ate there was phenomenal. And so I can honestly say I truly enjoyed the food. When we got over it, we walked across the bridge from El Paso to Juarez, and when we got into Juarez, it was really an interesting place. All the little kids would come up to us and beg for money and things like that. And we, like I said, we went to this Mexican restaurant, had this fabulous food, and when we left to head back to the United States across the border, the little kids were there again and begging for money. And I mean, Juarez looked like pretty bad shape at the time. I don't know what it's like now, but certainly was not a garden spot when we were there. And so that was my one and only trip that I ever made into to Mexico. And I'm glad I went, but it's not the place that I thought it would be, actually, because I heard, and I'm sure in different cities and that in Mexico, it's very beautiful and at the resorts and all of that. But in Juarez, it was kind of depressing, to be honest with you.
Yeah, long way from Honolulu. Speaking of which, you wanted to commemorate your time in the paradise of Hawaii. You and your fellow agents who all shared the experience to going over and keeping an eye on Ferdinand and Imelda, but it was a little bit controversial. A little, you had an idea for a T-shirt, and it almost blew up
which
on you.
which is tradition. We should note that
Right.
there are other instances where you make t-shirts to commemorate fun activities and bonding. So it's not completely out of the ordinary that Harry would want
Right.
to make a shirt about his time in Hawaii.
Yeah. When we were in Hawaii on the second trip, I just remember, as you guys indicated, it's kind of a commemorative thing that you buy a T-shirt of a city or a place that you've been, or something that happens, and that way you have that T-shirt to always remember your trip and remind you of the good times that you had, and also the work that you put in. But I was talking with one of the support employees at the time, and she talked about having access to somebody who made up T-shirts, and that had some kind of a silk screening business in that. And we kind of thought it would be fun to do a T-shirt, commemorative T-shirt that our teammates could take back to, our home divisions and that, and again celebrate the fact that we were on this trip together. And at the time, I had mentioned Marcos and the problems that were going on in the Philippines and that, and there was some indication that the Marcoses, Ferdinand and Imelda, left the country with a whole bunch of the country's money. And I think it was either Time or Newsweek had put on the cover of their magazine. Maybe it was a different magazine, I can't remember. But anyway, it was kind of a cartoon figure of Ferdinand and Imelda pushing out a huge money bag, trying to go through a small door. And they're both leaning on the bag, trying to push it through. And it was just, again, to indicate, the money leaving the Philippines and heading out. And we were kind of taken by that cartoon that we saw, and we decided that would be fun to put on our T-shirt. And again, we weren't worried about copyright or anything at that point. I mean, it was just going to be a small group of people that got the T-shirts, and we would use discretion on where we wore the t-shirt, only at FBI related functions, and would not certainly not wear it in Hawaii or anything like that. So went about getting this t-shirt printed up, and just enough a number of t-shirts that each teammate could have one, and it came out beautiful. It had a scene of a palm tree on one side, and it had Hawaii, and it had the year that we were there, and then on the back was this picture of the Marcoses trying to push this huge money bag out through a door like they were stealing the money from the Philippines. And so we had these out, we started handing them out, and sure enough, somebody said something to the brass at Honolulu office. Next thing I know, I'm getting called into the office, and I'm going, oh shit, what have I done now? I mean, I've done all these things, good things, and now I'm going to lose my job because of a t-shirt. And so I go in. I remember the case agent was a female agent, and she just practically crying, and she's telling me how I've ruined her career, and this is the most awful thing anybody could ever do. And I'm going, it's a joke. We're not selling them on the street. I mean, it's going to go to just the agents that work the case and that. Oh, she was so upset and everything. And anyway, we go into meet the SAC and the ASAC in the Honolulu office, and I just said, look, here was the idea. It's not going to be worn here in Hawaii. We're going to take it home. It's only going to be given to those that were on the team, very small number of teammates, and they're only going to wear it at FBI functions, like, informal functions, cookout or something like that. So it's really not a big deal. And once we talked it over, and that they realized that, hey, this is not the international incident that we were told it might be, and so everything was cool. We got to keep our t-shirts. There were no hard feelings. I didn't get thrown out of the FBI, and was able to go home, still employed by the FBI. So, but boy, I'll tell you, I was scared there for a while. I had no idea that it would cause that kind of a problem for the case agent and maybe the front office.
Oh
So,
boy.
anyway.
All right. Well, we're glad you dodged that proverbial bullet, Harry. Jesse, what are your takeaways from this one?
Well, my first takeaway is that travel does exist. Sometimes it is at a luxurious resort in Honolulu, and sometimes it is not. So don't join the FBI for the travel opportunities.
Yeah,
Correct,
please.
Harry?
Oh my gosh. No, places I've gone that I could tell you that they're not that they're not that beautiful. Let's just put it that way.
And the FBI has a good sense of humor. After you told me that t-shirt story, I thought, oh, everyone's still laughing? I like this. I like this.
Yep. Yeah,
Good to hear.
Yeah, it was fun time. Like I said, please don't get the idea that we didn't work, because we did. But boy, our downtime was fun. I can't think of a better place to have some downtime than Honolulu.
Yeah.
Every time you say that, I think of Barb, like bundling up in the Poconos, your wife. You're in Honolulu on the ocean, and then I think of your wife and her like coat.
Our house in the Poconos had an electric furnace, but it was so expensive. We had a coal burning stove. And so to heat the house, whoever, I mean, me or Barb, most of the time it was Barb, obviously, would have to go downstairs and shovel coal into the
yeah, because you're out running on the beach, and Barb is shoveling the coal.
The beers with Magic Johnson and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and Barb shoveling coal.
To make everything worse, I took these pictures on the beach.
Oh, and then you were like, hey, Barb, look at me.
Of course, at the time, we had to get the film developed, right?
Oh.
Yeah, you couldn't just text them to her. Not an option.
Yeah, exactly. I would take these pictures of, these beautiful girls on the beach, and
Re
and occasionally I would take one of a guy for Barb. So that when I got home and shared the pictures, I'd show her all these girls in bikinis. I said, "Here's one for you, honey." Some old guy with a beer gut wearing a thong or something like that.
Barb has a better sense of humor than the FBI. That's what I have to say.
That's for sure. Thank God for that.
Hey, Jesse, how can folks find us and support us?
We are on YouTube, all of your favorite podcast streaming platforms, and on our website as well.
All right. And for Jesse Himmelgarn, for retired FBI Special Agent Harry Trombitas, myself, Clark Conley, thanks again for tuning in.
Off the Record, an FBI agent's perspective, is created and hosted by Clark Donnelly, Harry Trombitas, and Jesse Himmelgarn. Produced by Jesse Himmelgarn. Stories in this podcast are inspired by Harry Trombitas' autobiography, Dark Places, about his time in the FBI. Music is called Cruise in the Back and is available on Storyblocks. You can find this podcast on all your favorite podcast platforms, YouTube, and on our website.